Intrigue, excitement, danger, and a man in a tuxedo with a martini in hand. These were the staples of the James Bond franchise, a cinematic phenomenon. But did someone pull the trigger on this beloved franchise? Or was it a case of suicide? Let's investigate. Let's explore the world of international espionage, not for a mission but for an autopsy. Yes, we're investigating what led to the decline of the James Bond franchise. Once the epitome of spy thrillers, this series has been met with a mixed reception in recent years. So who's the culprit? Was it a single person, a change in societal norms, or something else entirely? Let's dive in. We begin our investigation with Daniel Craig's era, who played Bond from 2006 to 2021. While Craig's earlier films were well received, later entries faced criticism for their darker tone and departure from the franchise's traditionally lighter, gadget-oriented approach. Could the shift in tone be a bullet to the franchise's heart? Next, we consider changing societal values. The Bond franchise has often been criticized for its portrayal of women and its glorification of casual violence. As society became more conscious of these issues, did Bond's appeal wane? The James Bond franchise, since its inception in the 1960s, has been known for its unique blend of thrilling action, exotic locales, deadly villains, and sultry Bond girls. But as societal norms evolved over time, the franchise found itself under scrutiny for its dated representation of gender roles and its often nonchalant approach to violence. Firstly, let's consider the franchise's portrayal of women. Traditionally, the Bond films have used women primarily as decorative figures or damsels in distress, often reducing them to the status of Bond girls, who exist mainly for the pleasure of the titular hero. These female characters are frequently seen as conquests, often lacking substantial character arcs or roles in the plot. As feminism grew stronger and awareness about gender equality spread, this portrayal of women started to seem more and more regressive. Audiences began to call for stronger, more empowered female characters, a call that later Bond films have tried to answer, albeit with varying degrees of success. Simultaneously, the casual display of violence in Bond films became another point of contention. Bond, the suave and debonair spy, often indulged in deadly violence with an air of nonchalance, leaving a trail of destruction in his wake without significant emotional fallout or consequence. As society became more conscious of the impact and ramifications of violence, this cavalier approach started to be seen as irresponsible and glamorizing violence. Bond's almost invincible nature and his lack of moral reckoning over his violent acts increasingly came across as unrealistic and problematic. In a world becoming more sensitive to issues of gender and violence, the Bond franchise was seen by some as out of step with the times. The swagger and casual dominance of Bond, which once made him an appealing figure, began to wane in the face of changing societal values. Thus, while the franchise didn't exactly die, it did face challenges adapting to these new norms and expectations, reflecting a shifting cultural landscape that was less tolerant of the dated tropes that had once defined the series. Box office earnings are another crucial piece of evidence. While Bond films continue to perform decently, they started losing ground to superhero movies and other high-octane franchises, suggesting a change in audience preference. The box office is the ultimate litmus test for a film's success, measuring not only the revenue it generates, but also its popularity among audiences. Over the years, the Bond franchise, despite some fluctuations, has had a solid run at the box office. However, as the cinematic landscape began to change, Bond started facing stiff competition. In the late 2000s and 2010s, a new kind of blockbuster began to emerge, the superhero movie. Pioneered by Marvel's cinematic universe and later joined by DC, this genre provided audiences with larger-than-life characters, epic battles of good versus evil, and fantastical storylines, all backed by stunning visual effects. The impact of these superhero movies was seismic, often dwarfing other franchises in terms of both box office earnings and cultural footprint. Superhero films offered something that the Bond franchise struggled to match: a shared universe. The interconnected storytelling across multiple films and characters, leading to massive ensemble movies like The Avengers, provided a sense of continuity and engagement that was rarely seen in cinema before. This new style of franchise filmmaking became hugely popular, and audiences flocked to theaters to see each new installment.
A group of remarkable people,
often leading to record-breaking box office figures. At the same time, other high-octane franchises like Fast and Furious and Mission Impossible also emerged as significant competition. These films, known for their thrilling action sequences, complex stunt work, and charismatic ensemble casts, offered a modern, fast-paced alternative to Bond's more traditional and singular hero-centric approach. While Bond films continued to perform decently at the box office, they began to lose ground in this increasingly crowded field. This shift suggested a change in audience preference, with viewers gravitating towards the interwoven narratives of superhero franchises or the high-speed action of modern action films. Consequently, the Bond franchise, once the gold standard of the action thriller genre, began to face a decline in its relative popularity and box office dominance. We also can't ignore the impact of streaming platforms. With the rise of Netflix, Amazon Prime, and other platforms, audience expectations shifted. More nuanced, long-form storytelling became the norm, and Bond's episodic structure might have lost its allure. Another suspect is franchise fatigue. With over 50 years and 25 films under its belt, is it possible that the Bond franchise has simply run its course? The repetitiveness of plot elements and the failure to evolve the character in meaningful ways could have contributed to its decline. Franchise fatigue is a real concern for long-standing movie series like James Bond. With over half a century's worth of history and more than 24 films, there's a risk that audiences could start to tire of the same formula playing out again and again. James Bond, despite his different incarnations, has always been the epitome of the charming and unflappable secret agent. He always gets the girl, he always thwarts the villain, and he always lives to die another day. This consistent narrative arc, while comforting in its predictability, can also breed a sense of complacency and repetitiveness. After all, when the outcome is predictable, the stakes seem lower, and audiences might start to lose interest. Furthermore, the Bond character himself has largely remained static throughout the series. While other long-standing franchises have managed to reinvent their characters and storylines in innovative ways, Bond has remained fundamentally the same, a suave, impeccably dressed spy with a license to kill. This lack of character evolution can make it harder for audiences to stay engaged with the franchise. After all, compelling characters are often those that grow and evolve over time, facing new challenges and undergoing personal transformations. The franchise's attempt at modernizing Bond, with Daniel Craig's grittier, more nuanced portrayal, did add some depth to the character. But some critics argued it was too little, too late, as it didn't fully address the deeper structural issues within the franchise. In this light, franchise fatigue could certainly be a factor contributing to the Bond franchise's relative decline. After decades of operating on the same formula, the series could benefit from a fresh, innovative approach that redefines Bond for a new generation of moviegoers while preserving the core elements that have made the character so iconic. Without such a change, the Bond franchise risks losing further ground to more innovative and evolving cinematic narratives. Finally, we turn our gaze to the directors and scriptwriters. Did their creative decisions and the way they chose to interpret Bond play a role in the franchise's downfall? Some argue that their failure to modernize Bond and the stories resulted in a franchise that felt out of touch with the times. As our investigation concludes, we find that no single person or element killed the Bond franchise. Rather, it's a combination of changing audience expectations, societal norms, market conditions, and creative decisions that led to its decline. But remember, Bond has been reinvented numerous times before, so who's to say he won't return stronger than ever? After all, in the world of James Bond, death is never quite the end. What do you think is killing the James Bond franchise? Let's discuss in the comments section.